a body that can exceed 7.5 meters, nearly 25 feet, thick enough around to rival a grown man's waist. A grip that doesn't crush bone. It works with every exhale, tightening a fraction more each time its prey's lungs empty. This is the heaviest snake alive on Earth today, strong enough in documented cases to overpower a caiman, strong enough to kill a jaguar in the water. And in the entire recorded history of science, there is not one confirmed, documented case of a wild green anaconda killing and eating a human being. Not rare, not almost never. In the wild, zero. Popular culture has spent nearly 30 years building the opposite story. The original 1997 film Anaconda imagined a snake stalking a documentary film crew down the Amazon, picking them off one by one. Brought to life on screen with a mix of real, far smaller snakes and oversized animatronics built specifically to exaggerate scale. It made enough money to spawn a string of sequels across the following decade, including 2004's Anacondas, The Hunt for the Blood Orchid, each one leaning harder into the same image of a snake actively hunting humans for sport. And now, in 2026, a new big-budget reboot is bringing that exact myth back into theaters for a generation that never saw the original. The real research tells a completely different story, and it comes from one of the longest continuous wildlife studies most people have never heard of. Herpetologist Jesus Rivas has spent over 30 years running a dedicated wild anaconda research program across the flooded grasslands of Venezuela's Llanos, personally capturing, measuring, and radio tracking hundreds of individual snakes across multiple decades, building one of the largest hands-on datasets ever assembled for this species. That's not a handful of encounters. That's a sustained, repeated relationship with an animal. Hollywood keeps casting as a monster, snake after snake, season after season. And across 3 decades of fieldwork, the pattern researchers report isn't aggression toward the people handling them. It's avoidance. So what is this animal actually built to do? Verified specimens have measured over 7.5 meters, roughly 24.6 feet, with body girth exceeding 30 centimeters, about a foot, at the thickest point, and weights recorded above 200 kilograms, over 440 pounds, in the largest confirmed females. Its jaw isn't hinged the way a human's is. The lower jaw connects to the skull through stretchable ligaments, allowing the mouth to open wide enough to swallow prey considerably larger than the snake's own head. Rows of small, recurved teeth don't chew. They hook backward, gripping and guiding prey inward, making it nearly impossible for anything caught to pull free. Its eyes and nostrils sit on top of its skull rather than the front, letting it lie almost completely submerged, invisible below the surface while still breathing and watching everything above the waterline. Its skin pattern, dark olive green broken by black oval blotches, does the rest of the work, breaking up its outline against sunlit water and shadowed vegetation until it simply disappears into the scenery. Beneath that skin, the jawbone itself acts almost like a hearing organ, picking up vibration conducted through water or ground and passing it directly to the inner ear, a sensory channel most land animals simply don't have access to. Combined with the tongue and the heat pits, an anaconda can build a surprisingly complete picture of what's approaching long before anything comes into view. Unlike the raw, crushing force people imagine from the films, constriction works through timing, not brute strength. Coils tighten a little more with every breath. The prey exhales, matching each exhale until the chest simply can't expand again. A mechanical, almost patient way of killing. And unusually among vertebrates, females dwarf males, sometimes reaching several times a male's length and many times his mass. One of the most extreme cases of female bias size difference, what biologists call sexual size dimorphism, found anywhere in the animal kingdom. Despite the monster movie image of a snake actively hunting down prey through the jungle, wild anacondas spend most of the year doing remarkably little. Rivas's long-term tracking data found that many individuals move only a handful of times across an entire season, conserving energy by simply staying still for weeks at a stretch, often returning to the exact same ambush sites again and again, year after year, decade after decade, as if the same stretch of riverbank has been claimed as permanent territory. The hunt itself follows the same pattern documented across the Amazon and the Llanos. Submerge in murky, often zero visibility water, remain completely motionless for hours, sometimes longer, and strike only when a capybara, a bird, or a caiman comes within range. A single explosive lunge rather than any kind of chase. Once prey is subdued, it's swallowed whole, head first, in a process that can take the better part of an hour for something the size of a caiman. After a meal that large, digestion itself can take days to weeks, during which the snake retreats to cover, basks in the sun to raise its body temperature and speed the chemical process along, and becomes, if anything, even less active than usual, the exact opposite of the relentless predator sold on movie posters. It is, without question, capable of taking down prey far larger and more dangerous than itself. Documented and photographed encounters exist of anacondas overpowering caimans several meters long, and in rare but recorded cases, killing jaguars that attack them in the water, one of the only animals on the entire continent capable of beating a jaguar in a direct one-on-one fight. That is the level of raw power sitting motionless in the reeds, and it has never once aimed at us. Anacondas are also strong, efficient swimmers, capable of crossing rivers and channels with far more speed and control underwater than on land, where their sheer weight makes them comparatively slow and exposed. That single fact shapes almost everything else about how this animal behaves. On land, an anaconda is not the apex predator of the story. In the water, submerged and hidden, it is. Some of the largest individuals ever measured have come directly out of Revis's decades of captures. Snakes long enough and heavy enough that recording an accurate weight required multiple researchers and specialized field equipment on site. Every one of those captures ended the same way: measurement, sampling, release, and a snake that made straight for the nearest deep water the moment it was free. Anacondas hunt almost entirely by chemical and heat cues rather than sight. A constantly flicking forked tongue samples particles from the air and water, feeding scent information to a specialized organ in the roof of the mouth, while heat-sensing pits along the jaw read the faint infrared signature of a warm body nearby. In water where visibility can be close to zero, this sensory system does more work than eyes ever could. Their reproductive behavior is one of the strangest in the reptile world. During breeding season, multiple males, sometimes a dozen or more, will locate a single receptive female through scent alone and form what researchers call a breeding ball, a writhing, tangled mass of competing males that can persist for several weeks, with the female largely controlling which male, if any, ultimately succeeds. And in captivity, anacondas have produced one of the strangest documented events in modern herpetology. A female housed for years with no access to a male gave birth to viable young, later confirmed through genetic testing to be a case of parthenogenesis, a virgin birth, offspring produced from the mother's genetic material alone. It remains one of the clearest documented examples of this phenomenon in a large vertebrate anywhere in the world, and it caught the scientists studying her completely off guard. Nobody expected to find it in an animal this size. Unlike the wolves, jaguars, and polar bears featured elsewhere on this channel, there's no comforting parental bonding story to tell here, and it would be dishonest to invent one just to fit the pattern. Female anacondas invest an extraordinary physical toll into reproduction. Over a pregnancy that can last around 6 months, a female may eat nothing at all, losing close to half her body weight by the time she gives birth. But anacondas don't lay eggs. They retain them internally and give birth to fully formed, fully independent live young. And once those young are born, there is no extended maternal care that follows. No teaching, no protection period, no bond that continues past the moment of birth. It's a completely different survival strategy than every mammal featured on this channel. All of the investment goes into the pregnancy itself. None of it goes into what comes after. So picture wading into flooded forest water where, somewhere beneath the surface, one of these animals is already aware of exactly where you are. The mechanism comes down to the same core logic seen elsewhere on this channel. Adapted to an ambush predator instead of a pursuit hunter, a strike only succeeds with total surprise, and a human standing upright, moving deliberately, registers as neither familiar prey nor an efficient use of energy. Anacondas are cold-blooded, which means their entire metabolism runs on a fraction of what a warm-blooded predator needs. Large individuals can go months between major meals. Every unnecessary strike, every wasted burst of muscular effort, carries a real, measurable biological cost to an animal that may not get another meal for a long time. Researchers who have spent decades handling wild anacondas repeatedly for measurement and tagging report the same consistent response. Over and over, when detected, the snake's overwhelming instinct is to flee toward deeper water, not to fight. Revis's team has approached, captured, and released the same individual snakes dozens of times across years of fieldwork, and the response doesn't escalate with familiarity. It stays exactly what it always was. An animal fully capable of overpowering a jaguar chooses, again and again, in encounter after encounter, to simply disappear instead. So if the wild record is genuinely spotless, why does the idea of a killer anaconda feel so believable that an entire film franchise could be built on it for 30 years? Because a small number of real, confirmed giant constrictor deaths do exist. They just aren't wild encounters. Every verified fatality involving a large constrictor snake and a human being on record involves a captive animal, kept as a pet, usually undersized or improperly fed relative to its actual size, in an enclosure where a keeper's routine physical presence became closely associated with feeding time rather than recognized as a person. That is an entirely different situation from a wild anaconda encountering a stranger in a flooded forest with no prior contact and no learned association at all. Strip out those captive incidents, and the wild record holds exactly as clean as it's always been described. The fear the films sell isn't built on wild behavior, it's built on isolated captivity accidents, generalized backward onto an entire wild species that has never actually done what it's accused of. It's worth being precise about the distinction, because it's the same conflation that fuels almost every exaggerated predator story. An animal raised in a box, fed on a schedule, and handled by the same person every day develops none of the natural wariness a wild individual carries from birth. Confusing that captive animal's behavior with wild behavior isn't a minor error. It's the entire basis of the myth. Here, the story inverts completely from every other episode on this channel. It isn't the case of humans breaking an existing peace through captivity or persecution. It's an animal that never posed the threat in the first place, being killed anyway because of a myth it never earned. For decades, anacondas across South America were hunted heavily for the exotic leather trade. Their skins turned into boots, belts, and bags for international fashion markets, a trade significant enough that the species is now listed under CITES Appendix 2, restricting international trade specifically because unregulated hunting pushed populations down across parts of its range. In many rural communities today, anacondas are still killed on sight out of pure fear, mistaken for a direct threat to livestock or children, despite there being no verified wild case anywhere that supports that fear. And popular culture keeps that fear alive, generation after generation. Every new monster movie anaconda, including the reboot arriving in theaters in 2026, reinforces the exact image that gets real, harmless wild snakes killed by frightened people who have never seen the actual research, and likely never will. The flooded forests and wetlands anacondas depend on are being drained and cleared at an accelerating rate for cattle ranching across the Amazon basin and Venezuela's llanos, converting seasonally flooded grassland into fenced pasture. Habitat fragmentation cuts populations off from one another, isolating breeding groups, while ongoing deforestation continues to shrink a range these animals have occupied for millions of years. The seasonal flood cycle itself, the annual rise and fall of water that anacondas time their entire hunting and breeding behavior around, is also shifting as regional rainfall patterns change, adding a second, less visible pressure on top of direct habitat loss. Illegal gold mining elsewhere in the Amazon adds a third, quieter threat. Mercury used to separate gold from sediment leaches into river systems downstream, working its way up the food chain into exactly the fish, caimans, and capybaras an anaconda depends on for every meal. Long-term research programs like Revis's continue tracking population health across the decades, feeding data into regional conservation efforts, and some protected wetland reserves across the llanos have shown the populations can hold steady where habitat is left genuinely intact. But outside those protected pockets, the pressure building on the ecosystem itself keeps outpacing the protections meant to hold it back. For nearly 30 years, movie posters have sold the green anaconda as a monster stalking the jungle specifically for human prey. In the entire history of documented wild science, it has never once earned that reputation. Every other predator featured on this channel had to earn back its story from an old, inherited fear that at least started from a real encounter, however exaggerated over time. The anaconda never even did anything to deserve the one it stuck with. Somewhere in the flooded grasslands of the llanos right now, one of these animals is almost certainly lying motionless in the reeds, exactly as it has for weeks, waiting on something that isn't us and never was. The real mystery was never why it hasn't killed us. It's how much longer we'll keep telling the story that it has.